Hello, my name's Jason Kennedy and I'm here on behalf of Hi-Fi Plus to tell you about the sound of the PMC 25.26i floor standing loudspeaker. The 25.26i is the largest model in the range. It's a three-way with a 34mm tweeter, a 50mm mid-range dome and a 7-inch or 170mm bass driver. It stands a metre, just over a metre high, 104 centimetres to be precise, and has what they call a transmission line loading system, whereby the pressure off the back of the bass driver is directed through a transmission line that runs through within the loudspeaker and vents at the bottom. The sound that comes out of the vent at the bottom is only bass, and that's in phase, so it's in time with the bass from the bass driver. The nature of a transmission line means that you need a lot more woodwork within the cabinet to provide the line, and that reinforces the cabinet, stiffens it and makes it more rigid, which is a good thing with any loudspeaker. If the speaker isn't rigid and solid, then the cabinet itself vibrates and adds to the sound, colours the sound. So one of the side benefits, I guess, of a transmission line is that you get a stronger cabinet. But the other side of that coin is it costs more to make. Hence, this is a near £10,000 loudspeaker at £9,895 at present. The 26i and its sibling, the 24i, in the PMC 25 series, have an isolation system built into their bass. What you see from above is a pair of stainless steel bars with spikes either side, and they're sort of like outriggers. They stick out further than the loudspeaker. But between those bars and the box itself, the cabinet, there is an isolation grommet, for want of a better word, a sort of damper that stops frequencies going through into the floor and vice versa, stops other energy coming up from the floor into the loudspeaker, which is generally beneficial to any loudspeaker. You don't want vibration coming into the box from the other loudspeaker, for instance. The 25.26i is a relatively easy load. You don't need tons of power to run it, but you do need the more the merrier, really. It is a high power loudspeaker. You can drive it at high levels, so control is desirable. I use a variety of amplifiers with it, and actually started with a Riga LXR, which is not particularly powerful. It's only a 72.5 watt peculiarly rated amplifier, but I had better results with more powerful amplifiers. In my room, which is fairly bass light, I have to put the speakers, these PMCs, I have to put them very close to the wall, about 17 centimetres away, which is not very far, but in many respects that's quite nice because you don't have the loudspeaker in the room and it doesn't dominate the room. The transmission line approach does result in slightly leaner bass than a conventional ported loudspeaker. It's definitely cleaner though than average. I mean, some ported loudspeakers are capable of extremely clean bass, but you do tend to get very clean and timely bass with this loudspeaker. It's one of its key assets, part of its appeal is that the timing is fantastic because the bass doesn't lag behind the mid and treble. this was certainly the case with the Riga amplifier. It was a little bit dry, the balance with that amplifier, because they're both, the amp and the speaker, have an inclination in that direction, but the timing, the engagement, the musical engagement was excellent, and I really enjoyed it, has to be said. Voices were really well handled, for instance. There's plenty of expression and feeling came through from all manner of singers, to be honest. There's something about this loudspeaker that allows emotional communication. There's definitely no barrier to emotional communication. If you've got a decent source, a decent amplifier, you will hear the feeling in the music, which is arguably one of the most important things about the music. They're also extremely wide dispersion loudspeakers. I talked a bit about this in the introduction to this review, but essentially it means that the sound spreads out upwards, downwards, sideways, almost, and sort of reflects off the rest of the room, so you get a much larger scale than you do with certain types of loudspeakers. And this adds to the sort of sense of presence and air and life in the music. It also, ironically, makes the speaker less room dependent. Some speakers have a very direct sound. You hear mostly what's coming out the front of the box, and they try and stop sound waves coming out sideways and bouncing off the walls. But this approach seems to work a bit better in that respect, because it includes the room, or takes into account the room, which is always a major factor in any sound system. It sounds more natural and even. I particularly like the way the sound escapes the boxes. You don't, despite this being a reasonably big loudspeaker, you don't get the sense of there being a wooden box vibrating in the room, which tends to create a sound that just sort of sticks to the speakers. Here the sound is right across the front of the room, producing a strong central image, but also producing images beyond the speakers as well. This is a result of the wide dispersion and the solidity of the cabinet, and of course the way the drive units themselves have been designed, and the crossover that connects them all up, of course. Bass is also a strong point. I really like the bass on these speakers. As I said, it's not overblown, but it isn't dry. It's a really good balance between power, control, and extension. It goes down really low, and that gives the music a real feeling of solidity and power. And anyone that likes playing at higher levels will enjoy that particularly, but it works at all levels, to be honest. It's just that some loudspeakers, the bass works well at lower levels, but tends to struggle a bit when you turn it up. PMC come from a pro audio studio background, and as a result all of their loudspeakers will play at high level without discomfort or distortion, which can be a lot of fun. They're also very open and fast, which is very important, I think. You would get a real sense of snap and sort of attack. There's no lag to the sound, there's no sense of the speaker trying to keep up with the music. The notes happen and they start and they stop precisely as they should. So you get plenty of decay or reverb if it's on the recording, but if it's not, if it's dry and it just stops, they just stop with it. This means that with more complicated pieces of music, there's no sense that there's any blurring between the instruments. You can hear exactly what each musician is doing, whether they're a singer or a guitarist, a drummer, whatever. It all makes sense, which definitely increases the sense of enjoyment, because your brain isn't having to work so hard. and it increases the sense of engagement because you really really pulls you in, you really want to listen. With a more powerful ATC P2 power amplifier, there was definitely a greater sense of control and power, essentially grip. That amplifier is like 300 watt amplifier, so it's considerably more powerful than the Riga, and you can hear that. You can hear that in the control and the delivery, the energy, but you can also hear it in subtle stuff. You know, you can hear more low-level detail, quieter sounds, larger pieces sound better, they've got more energy in this. You do need more power to achieve that with this loudspeaker, and most loudspeakers for that matter. They really bring out the character of each musician and recording for that matter, but I played a piece of Alfred Brendel's Beethoven on piano, and that had so much sort of nuance and feeling and just real, you got a real sense of what a great piece of music and what a great player were making the record, really, which is, it makes it a very rewarding experience when you can hear into the recording like that. It gives you more, makes it a more enjoyable process of listening. Isn't exactly a process, of course, but that's what the end result is. I also tried a different power amplifier called More Amps Angel 6, which isn't as powerful as the ATC at 150 watts, but is a little bit more transparent, maybe a lot more transparent. You can hear, with a loudspeaker like this, you can hear a lot more detail through it. You can really hear quiet, low-level sounds. There's excellent dynamic range, so when you get a loud impact, it comes through loud compared to what was before. You know, the contrast between volume levels of instruments, of recordings, is very, very clear. And these loudspeakers really made the most of that upgrade in amplifier. You could hear, just hear a lot more, basically. So much so that I've hung on to that power amplifier and actually bought it because it's that much more revealing than what I had before. The PMC 25-26i is a loudspeaker I could quite easily live with. In fact, I've managed to borrow a pair for a long-term loan because they do everything I want from a loudspeaker, really. They give you dynamics, they give you imaging, they give you speed, they give you power, and they're wide bandwidth. You know, they go high and they go very low. You can't really ask much more of a loudspeaker than that, except for low distortion, and they do that too. So in many ways it's a perfect loudspeaker. It's bigger than average, perhaps, not enormous by high-end standards, of course, but the fact that it can sit relatively close to the wall means it doesn't dominate the room. You know, it sits sort of nicely in the room, and close your eyes and you can't really hear where they are, which is always a good sign, I'd say, in any loudspeaker. If you can't pinpoint where the sound is actually coming from, that means the speaker is not adding to the sound, it's sitting back and letting the music come through. Like all good loudspeakers, it needs decent partnering equipment, but give it that and combine that with the sort of extremely high quality of finish and build, and you have a pretty hard speaker to beat, even at its relatively high price. It's worth considering that it has a 20-year warranty, which is quite a rare thing in hi-fi. Very few brands will offer you more than 2 or 3 years. So that's a sort of peace of mind. That and the fact that PMC have been consistently making excellent loudspeakers for what must be over 25 years, going on 30 years now. So I can wholeheartedly recommend the PMC 25-26i. Thank you.